Hello and good evening, everyone. We have waited for many weeks to come back to you this evening and share in this new season of live talk. And we are so tremendously thankful for what God has done throughout the season. And we are excited about what is ahead. And so tonight on our live talk broadcast, we are meeting with the doctors. That is one of our featured programs throughout the season. And we are so blessed to have with us someone who is very qualified in his field and has devoted himself and his life to assisting others and to changing the dynamics of how they handle their mental and emotional health. And as a spiritual leader, being able to give that dynamic and balance on those varied areas. So tonight and this evening, we are joined by Dr. Orville Brown. I had the blessed privilege of meeting him for a very providential connect and was very moved by his experience and the way that he deals with and handle matters in his field. And I found it to be something that God really set up because I personally felt very strengthened after dialoguing with him. And I am praying that you experience that same transition in your emotional and otherwise state as you get to know him and hear what he has to share on the matters of mental health and the issues that are affecting so many in our world today. So, Dr. Brown, would you kindly just tell us a little bit about the amazing way that God has used you in your specified field and just tell us a little bit about what exactly some of your focuses are because I know that you are well rounded in doing different things.
Thank you very much, Josie, for this opportunity you have given me to be here.
Absolutely.
Share some of my passion in the area of mental health and also what I do. I am the director of spiritual care in at Meritus Hospital here in Hagerstown, Maryland, United States. And what that means is that I have chaplains and pastors and faith leaders who engage patients, and I supervise these individuals as they do the work within the hospital. I'm also a clinical pastoral supervisor, which means I train chaplains, pastors, and other caregiving professionals in relating to people in crisis and in need and so I do that also. So that is basically what I do. My training uh, involves a wide variety of areas.
I
I've been trained
realize that.
in prison chaplaincy. I've been trained in multi faith chaplaincy. In other words, how to relate to people from different faiths. I'm also been trained. I have a doctorate in theology with a specialization in the field of spiritual care and pediatric HIV ethics. You know, some people just summarize that as bioethics. I do research. I'm a social scientist, and I've been involved in several research specifically related to HIV stigma and how to minister specifically with people with HIV. Uh, when it comes to this particular conversation, I have a lifetime passion in humanizing mental illness. And what do I mean by that? Is for people to see mental illness as part of the human experience. It's very difficult to see uh, human experience without understanding the common code. So if you understand that the common cold is part of the human experience that we have, then it is easier to understand mental illness as such a human experience, as more common and more what should I say, more humanized and not demonized, which is very common in certain religious circles to demonize mental illness.
So, with that thought and with this understanding, currently in the world, as you are fully aware, the world has really gone through a very difficult, process in this particular year, 2020. I think we've heard the word death more, and my condolences more than we probably have in many seasons of life. And so many people are battling with their mental health, including people who never once looked at it from a perspective of having any mental health challenges. How would you say would be an appropriate way to define what mental health is? Because when we think about it, we think of the people on the street who are totally uncapped and has just lost it, or they're locked up in some asylum. So how would you define, now that we see so many people who are supposedly on the normal and now having those battles and struggles, what would be an appropriate and sensitive term to define mental health?
I define mental health in terms of relationships. Make it easy to break it down. And the first aspect that many people don't understand is relationship with self. I call it intrapersonal relationship within yourself. How you feel about yourself, how you see yourself, how you treat yourself. And when that treatment is disproportionate or is punitive or is harmful to self, that is mental health, as the beginning. Your relationship to self, it begins with self. The second aspect I see as interpersonal. Yeah. Your ability to relate to other people, to talk with other people, to be sensitive to other people, and to be kind, and to be able to feel comfortable in the presence of others, whether we're looking at partnerships, relationships, whether we're talking about marital, spousal relationships, or parent-child, child-parent, relationship with at the job, supervisors, and with people who are report to you, etc. So I see it in terms of relationship, relating to others, and also I see it in terms of professional, vocational, or what should I say, professional, vocational, functioning, the way you function within your vocation. Children, for example, the way they relate to their job, which is school. Children, their job is to learn, right? So the ability to learn and the comfort level they are with their, with their ability to learn. So I call that, relationship with your functioning. Yes, and also age appropriate functioning, to be at a certain age and to function at that age level, etc. And so that is it. And when I think of relational and functioning, I also think of relating at a certain age. I'll give you an example. You have some people who are aging, and with aging, their ability to function is different from when they were younger. For example, I have colleagues that insist on playing soccer. Some of them are 60 years old, 70, 80 years old, etc. And they still want to play soccer, but not only with people their age, but they try to play soccer with people 20, 30, 40 years younger than themselves. And the amazing thing is about these folks are very, what should I say, they're very adept mentally to react to the situations that they're involved. But somehow there is a disconnect between what their mind tells them they can do, that they did 20, 30, 40 years ago, and what their body can actually do. right? And that disconnect brings about what I call age adjustment issues. So we have a lot of people that we see in the hospital who have age adjustment issues, which I mean, what I mean to say is that they're struggling to accept the fact that they're aging and they're struggling. And they cannot do the things that their mind tell them they could do or their bodies could do 20, 30 years ago. And we have a lot of people suffering from that. So then there's the issue. That's one aspect of mental health. Then there's the issue of trauma, the effect of trauma or traumatic experiences on people, usually beginning with childhood. Very simple example. Very simple example. Very common too in some corners. Some people would say, I grew up with, then they would say my auntie or my grandmother or my grandfather, or they would give a list of people that they grew up with. In other words, I didn't grow up with my parents. Okay? That is a traumatic experience in and of itself because it deals with issues of abandonment, where the child who did not grow up with their mother, feel abandoned by their mother or by their father, even though they may have grown up in a very warm, very nurturing environment. Correct? So the trauma brings about issues of adjustment when it comes to relationship with yourself, relationship with others in your life, or whether your parents, etc., relationship with your functioning at your job, etc., etc. Or they might be abuse issues or whatever, sexual, emotional, verbal abuse, etc. Very abusive environment, toxic environment the child grew up in. Then that child takes that toxicity into their adulthood, into their relationship, into etc. They're functioning at work, etc. So the whole idea is that adds insult to injury when it comes to the child's well-being. Yeah.
So, from
And
one
we just started mentioning about other mental health issues such as clinical depression and those kinds of
right,
things.
and
Uh,
that's really what my
yes,
follow-up question
yes,
was going to be,
yes.
because generally we see it from just that perspective.
Mm,
We think about things like bipolar, schizophrenia,
mm,
manic depression,
mm,
all of the personality disorders. These are some of the
mm,
things that we, see as mental illness. When you
mm,
mention the matters of abandonment, particularly in the subject of mass migration, which could be a whole other subject in itself, where children were left behind as parents traveled to other parts of the world in search of a better life and were left with relatives of various kind, whether grandparents or aunts or uncles.
mm,
And generally, when these children grow up and attempt to share the feelings of abandonment that they experience, people are usually confused because they're like, well, your aunt was good to you. Your grandparents were good to you. What is the problem? Because there is that disconnect that you mentioned, to be able to
mm,
realize that the fact there was another parent or another adult did not replace the fact that the actual parents were absent. Or things like the parent going to jail, where you have the
mm,
child being raised without one or both of the parent because they have been incarcerated. And you hit the nail on the head, because people seem to not be able to understand that the fact that there was another adult never replaces the fact that you are
mm.
aware that this was not your parent. So, can you talk a little bit about that lingering trauma that goes into adult life, and how do you shake that off?
Well, it's not a matter of shaking it off.
Okay.
I believe people need to understand what has happened first from a child's perspective,
Right.
because a lot of people are adults now. They look back and they can rationalize and they can even relate to the parent that went away. But the child who witnessed it and who experienced it is still traumatized,
That's right.
and into adulthood still reacts as a child. So we have a lot of people, we call it the presenting past or transference, who are in a situation in their adult age in life, And when a similar situation come up, or somebody that resembles that person who abused them or abandoned them or whatever, like their parent or whatever, as they saw it as a child abandonment, then they revert back to the child reaction. And they react to that person now in the present as they would have reacted in the past. So that child is alive and well. I kind of look at it as a what I call a revolving door.
Mm-hmm.
So when they are triggered in the present, they go back to the past. And since they have not resolved or dealt with those issues in the past, they go through what I call a revolving door. Now, I would hate to admit this. I have been in revolving doors, and I find the people that clean revolving doors do a fantastic job sometimes.
My Lord.
So when I'm trying to get out of that revolving door, I swear I'm dealing with an opening. But rather than hitting the opening and being free, I hit the glass. And I make several attempts and hit the glass. And we have people like that in our world today who are constantly being triggered and returning back to that trauma or that situation. And because it hasn't been dealt
It was
with,
never addressed or dealt with.
it was never addressed. They never understood it. They never understood the effect of it and how it has, what should I say, tailored their life up to that point. And they're totally clueless that they're acting like that child rather than acting like the adult. They may be extremely versed in other aspects of their life, right? They may be very good at it, right? But they, in that specific area, like some people with the issue of relationships, they just revert back and they begin to, they go through that revolving door experience and get frustrated thinking that they can get out. The opening is there, but they hit it. And it becomes very damaging because it's hurtful, I can confess, to try to get through that beautifully cleaned revolving door and think I'm at an exit and hit that glass is an extremely painful experience. So what happens is some people, they avoid situations like that then, where that would take them back there because it's too painful. So you have a lot of people that are single forever in their life, that because they've had painful experience in their past, and it's so painful that they're afraid of going back. So they live their life circumventing the pain. Circumventing the pain.
And I am assuming that this is also true of the homes where both parents could actually be in the home, but one could be absent by way of profession, career, unavailability, or matters going on in the marriage that is not allowing them to be as present the way that the child would need. I am assuming the same trauma would be present in a situation
Yes.
like that.
Yes. We have so many issues that go on in homes, etc. When it comes to one issue I have found very helpful is parentification. Doing some study on parentification, where the child is parentified. Because say the father died, okay, when the child was very young, and the child now may have been 8, 9 years old. Don't cry, they're told. You man up. You're the man of the home now. You're the boy. So you have to look after your mother. So at that point, that child is parentified. And that child develops, never have a childhood, normal childhood. It interferes with their childhood development. And so the child may learn some positive things about that, like you grow up pretty quickly, you get responsibilities at a young age, etc. On the one hand, but on the other hand, to be forced to be a parent and to take on that responsibility also causes damage and effect on the child's sense of self, intrapersonal, the way they relate to other people, interpersonal, and also they're functioning in a job, correct? Yes, they function in a job. For example, if they get a job where they have a male person has a female supervisor, right? And want to then parent that female as they parented their mother, because that's the way they related to females,
That is incredible.
right? So those are the issues. But there's another point they need to take into consideration. They're to connect the two, because you talk about people who are in institutions and people, they have a clinical diagnosis from DSM-5, which is the diagnostic tool psychiatric uses, use. There is, at least in my experience, a relationship between people who tend to experience those kinds of traumatic things in their life, and first of all, parents who have had similar experiences with mental illness due to their own trauma, and also between those children who experience mental illness at the time when they're growing up. Because sometimes, I'm trying to find the best way to put it now. Sometimes in that child's experience, right, as that person is growing up, they have learned from their parent who have had similar trauma to relate to the situations similar to the way the parents relate to, right? Sometimes the damage at a child's age, that childhood age, has been so powerful that recovery, a full recovery, is not possible. For example, if you have a physical injury as a child, and that physical injury is in your back, and it affects your nervous system here, your spine, and you're not able to walk. You may be able to function in many ways. You could get therapy to help you in many ways, but that disability to your back has permanently injured your ability to walk.
Right.
Okay. So there may be even therapies as the future holds that might help you to walk, but it would not be without help.
Right. Or to be what it was before.
Exactly. Exactly. Not 100%, but you can still function. So there are a lot of people who have been impacted so tremendously by emotional injury, mental injury, whatever you want to call it, trauma, etc., that they are permanently disabled in such a way that they would have limited ability to recover. But a lot of them can still function within certain parameters. So what I tell people that I train, like pastors, etc., I let them know that not everyone needs therapy that will leave therapy. It's like maintenance ministry, so to speak, where you're helping them to maintain a certain level of normalcy, a certain level of functioning, so that they might uh, make a contribution to society. There is, however, that I found in my experience in counseling some people like that, that there's a level of frustration. There's a level of frustration with some people in that population. So the job of the therapist is to help them understand what the damage was about, and to help them come to grips with their functioning up to a certain extent, and to be able to make contributions within those parameters.
It sounds to me that by what you have described and the the definition that you are shaping for us, that is definitely broader than the traditional understanding and concept of what mental illness is. Because, like I shared with you earlier, it is generally this thought process we have whenever we think about mental illness. It sounds to me that at some point in our journey, we definitely, not everyone, but a lot of individuals who, by all standard, may seem normal, have definitely had some kind of cross with mental illness of some point, particularly on the subject of trauma, because I believe throughout our life, at some point, we all go through some aspect of trauma, whether through loss or through breakups or heartbreaks, as you mentioned, with probably the person who never loves again because of that damaged or broken relationship, even in the family. So, have we somewhat skewed the actual definition of what mental illness is? Because we've seemed to remain very committed to a focus of what it is. But from what I'm hearing and the great way that you're able to give us a broad dynamic of how that could really be many of us, even in our professional lives. So, how do we bring it to the context where we are able to release people from that stigmatization whenever we
Yeah.
hear the term and allow
See,
them to be able to leave that out?
one psychologist named Frechette, he wrote a book on shame, shame, and he makes a statement. Frechette, he said, "No one comes through life unscathed."
Wow. And that is the truth.
The issue is that some people, depending on the level of the trauma, etc., they experience, right, makes them are more vulnerable for those kinds of conditions, that you are describing there when people are in behavioral health hospitals and stuff. They're more vulnerable because of what I call, and with very popular terminology these days, pre-existing conditions.
Conditions. And we tend to relate to that mostly in the physical and not
Exactly.
really in the spiritual, but there are pre-existing conditions in the, I
Yes.
mean, the emotional and psychological and mental state.
Yes. Let me give you an example. Right now,
Okay.
right we're in COVID, in the midst of a disastrous, difficult, catastrophic pandemic. Okay, those individuals who tended to be easily made anxious, they have anxiety issues. You know, prior to the pandemic, would be more vulnerable to the added anxiety because of the pandemic. Does that make sense? Those
Yes.
who had abandonment issues and isolation issues prior to the pandemic would be much more vulnerable to experience mental illnesses or mental, what should I say,
Breakdowns or
breakdowns,
yeah.
etc. Now that they are forced to be alone during the pandemic, correct? Those people with phobias, prior to the pandemic, yeah, would be much more prone to feel overwhelmed with a virus that's invisible and even see viruses literally that you can't see because of that inclination that they have to be paranoid. You get what I'm
Yes,
saying?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Because those
yeah.
pre-existing conditions are there.
Yeah,
Because those
yes,
things were already happening prior to something that is so traumatic. Because even those
exactly.
of us who really, had our bearings, we've all been affected by this
Mhm.
very unusual season of life. Even those of us who counsel others, because how could we not be affected? We had to deal
Mhm.
with the inability to socialize with our family and friends and people that we
Mhm.
love. Ministers who once went to congregations and ministered to congregations, they've lost the ability to be able to do that. So I think we've all suffered some aspect of our own traumas. Of course, I'm sure you would
Mhm.
agree that we handle that in all different ways. So, but I can
Exactly.
see your reasoning that those individuals who already had the panic attacks on a regular day,
Mhm.
already was depressed, already was saddened, already was in despair, unable to function, had all those imbalances emotionally. Now to be dealing with something like this where they are unable to relate, they are unable to see the people that they love. I can see that now being heightened. So I want to ask you then, we've focused a lot on the actual virus and what it has done physically and the death, and which is terrible and has certainly brought a lot of pain. But I think what we have not given a lot, although I notice there's probably more conversation coming along those lines, as we look into the future, I believe we're anticipating a wave of a greater pandemic of mental, illness from that kind of traumatization, of being locked down, being in isolation. And we know that those things had to be implemented for our betterment. So, can you talk to us a bit about how do we, as we look into the future and even moving into the days and the months ahead, as things change and we could look at another wave of this whole virus dynamic, where do we position ourselves to not go down that path of detriment where our mental health is concerned?
I have one word I contend with what you're saying, the word future.
Okay.
There is no such thing as going into the future. We're experiencing, for example,
Wow.
we're experiencing a disproportionate number of people in our behavioral health unit,
Wow.
right? People are calling hotlines right now in record numbers. Um, yeah, so your question is very relevant, but we're not talking future now. We're
We're
talking,
here.
we're in it.
Wow.
We're in it right now.
So,
Just,
yeah.
just looking at somebody as a carrier, treating somebody as an asymptomatic carrier, or being treated as an asymptomatic carrier, it messes with your mind.
So
Just
how
think
can we
about
be there for each other? What can we
it.
do in this season of life? In the we don't have a lot of control of what is happening, even though we may try to keep things together on a personal end. But there is a much broader, aspect that we don't have much control over. And of course, we'll talk about the spiritual aspects of all of this. But we're not merely spiritual, we're not merely physical. There's a whole dynamics, as you know, that come with us. So how do we then, nurture each other? What advice would
But
you be able to give on how we can nurture each other to be each other's keeper in this season of life?
okay, this is no. We're gonna bring in the spiritual whether you want to.
It will come in,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh yeah. So let's why not do it now then? Just get to it. Okay. Let's get to it now. First of all, first of all, that commandment of love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and your neighbor as yourself. I have found very instructive in dealing with, remember those relationships, intrapersonal,
Yes.
interpersonal, etc., functioning, that kind of stuff. I found it very instructive as we look. A lot of people are looking towards a faith base, someone, higher power, whatever you want to call it, that person, God, whatever, Krishna, Jesus, I don't know. But some people, need someone bigger than the virus or something bigger than the virus to be able to look to a purpose, meaning, give them purpose and meaning in life and put their energy into that. I find that's very critical. As a healthcare provider, as I am, chaplain, etc., I find that it has brought me a sense of fulfillment, knowing that I'm doing something, I'm making a contribution. We support the staff at the hospital. We support patients who are locked outside without their family. Even now, patients are not COVID positive, we visit them, but there's no family member. So I would say something like, pretend I'm your family member. They make jokes about, well, yeah, you're like my brother, but we look different, but yeah, we're family. Yeah, so having that purpose, having that vocation, having that calling where you're making a contribution, it gives you a sense that you're doing something, you're making a difference. There's something bigger. You're looking for something bigger than yourself, and you're contributing to this. For example, Josie, you're in this program. You're making this contribution. Give you that sense of fulfillment, accomplishment, etc. Whatever. So that sense of higher power. Some people just are atheists; they don't believe in God, and I respect that. But what I don't respect is, what should I say? There is this tendency within Christian circles and even other circles from other religions of putting others ahead of yourself. In Christian circles, they say, "Come on, J-O-I, Jesus first, others second, then yourself last." Jesus first, if you priority, meaning, life, higher power, whatever you want to put that, yourself second, and others third.
Could that understanding have come, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but did that understanding come from Jesus's conversation with the rich young ruler where, he's seeking direction? And there are other times when he referenced, what the greatest commandment was, loving God and then loving others. Did people
No,
somewhat
it didn't say
interpret
that.
that
It didn't say that. It says love others as
as
yourself.
yourself, right? So that's what I'm saying.
So
Is there a
yourself come first.
misunderstanding?
Exactly. Yourself come first. And then you love others in proportionate
To the way that you love yourself.
to love yourself. Love is mediated through the person to others.
Right.
You don't get love for yourself by what you do to others.
Right.
Because you can't give what you don't have. So unless you address that love of yourself, that intrapersonal relationship, then it makes no sense what you're doing. Because what happens is, and I find this very, very common when I counsel people, what they would say is, I find myself giving to others and helping others, but what about me? Another example, perfect example. I have a mortgage to pay, say, and that mortgage is due on the 6th of the month, right? Somebody approached me and said, listen, could you lend me X amount of dollars so that I can pay my rent due the 1st of the month, right? And then I'm getting paid on the 3rd of the month. And as soon as I get paid, I will repay you that money. So you will have no problems paying your mortgage. Right? Now, do I have money to lend this person? Do I? No, I don't. I don't have money to lend them. Like I tell my children when they were used to tell me, they says, well, could you give me $50? I said, I don't have $50. I said, go to the bank, they tell me, put that card in and get money. And I say, I have $50 in the bank, but I don't have $50 for that. I have $50 so you guys have food. So that person now is taken from their substance, the ability to live and have a shelter, to give this person money, to lend them, to take care of their affairs, while depending on them to repay. Well, you know the story. That happens so many times. They borrow the money and don't pay.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 6th of the month come, the 7th of the month come, the 8th of the month come, and by the time the 9th of the month come, when you run into the person, that person is steaming. They're steaming. They're angry. They're burning from both ends. They're fuming because they've given what they don't have. And so we have a lot of people who are fuming and angry because they're putting others ahead of themselves and meeting the needs of others instead of their own needs. And they are very angry.
And
So
I would say, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
the issue is we need to take care of ourselves. People need to get psychotherapeutic consultation. Talk to somebody professional, somebody that will respect confidentiality, somebody that understands what they're coming from, somebody that is also taking care of themselves. Right?
And I guess there is some kind of a misunderstanding too, in the sense that, we've been taught in our spiritual circles about not being self centered, not being selfish. And I guess a lot of that mindset is coming from that perspective as well. Wanting to, be able to give that portrayal of being someone who lives in humility and lives in accordance with the will of God, that, you don't want to be selfish and you don't want to be self centered. And to help you to not to be that way, then you put others first. But really, in essence, when you think about it, even when you're flying, you're always encouraged, look, put on your oxygen mask before you give
Exactly.
anybody else
Exactly.
oxygen, because
Exactly.
obviously,
Yeah.
if you are dying, how do you help somebody else? So I
What people
definitely,
call
yes.
what people call humility, I call arrogance. Think that you can help other people without getting help for yourself first. To think you can give what you don't have.
Right.
I find
So
that
I
arrogant. I
believe it
don't find
comes from a place of
it's
misunderstanding.
no, not only.
Well,
There's
we
more
can
to it.
agree to disagree. I love this.
No, 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 no. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just adding to what you're saying.
Okay, okay.
It comes from a place of woundedness and
Got
brokenness.
it. Got it.
Okay?
Got it.
So what happens is a lot of times we interpret the Bible based on a prior brokenness.
I agree.
Because as a person who, for example, in the past was abused, that person, that abused person, has been taught that they value nothing,
Mm.
been put down by people, have been mistreated by people. So they take that mentality and interpret the scripture as if everybody has come before me because I'm not worth anything. And a lot of people actually tell me that they believe that Christianity is putting others before them because they worth nothing. And if they want to value themselves, then they're being proud or arrogant rather than being human and taking care of yourself so you
In
can give.
order to take care of others.
No, you do it to take care of yourself because you're worth it. And then
Right.
you take care of others because they're worth it.
Right. But out of your substance of the wellness, the healing, and the care that you've given to you, then from what you're sharing, you're better able to give because now you have
Exactly.
it to give.
Exactly. You got it. You got it.
Okay. I
So,
think we're getting each other.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I am not disagreeing with you. I'm just letting you know that we fit in our own dysfunctional thinking into scripture. But
Yes,
it's
I do agree.
scripture, love your neighbor as yourself. So love comes through you. So your capacity to love is limited by your ability to love yourself.
Yes, there is no question that when we look at the overall understanding of how we have interpreted, God's word, whether it is on the basis of using scripture to support or prejudices or dysfunctions or discriminatory practices, which many have done, it's not always from the spiritual perspective of allowing God's spirit to bring his interpretation. We take a lot of our preconceived ideas, perceptions, cultural shapings, all the things that we live in life, we've actually brought to scripture and have made it fit our purposes. When really, in essence,
Or
yes,
when I don't I to save purposes, I understand that some people do that, but
right,
in this situation is the lack of understanding of yourself that you're
okay,
feeling, not necessarily that you have a purpose
purpose.
to make yourself or others, or to expend yourself, to help others, and have people actually treat you as a doormat
Just because
right?
you're trying to prove.
Exactly. I don't think anybody intends that, but it's
Right.
part of their brokenness. It just fits into their own
It's
dysfunction.
playing out even in the spiritual and religious experiences.
Exactly. So even you understand your ability to grow and to mature spiritually is limited by your ability to love, value, and appreciate yourself.
Now, that is very intriguing because, again, on the subject of mental health, which is very critical in this particular season of life, it's still a taboo kind of subject that people are not comfortable talking about. So, from your experiential and professional counseling perspective, how are you able to advise or caution on helping people to override these stigmatizations so that we can effectively help people to be more vulnerable with sharing their struggles with their mental illnesses? Because many people suffer in silence because of the stigma that is surrounding it. They're not coming forward. So, how do we deal with that? How do
But
you advise on that?
one thing I do, and you have noticed it, you picked up on it, I relate physical illness to uh, to emotional illness. I don't know if you picked up on that. For example, let me give you a perfect example. This is a live experience that happened a few years ago with this gentleman. He was riding his motorcycle, minding his own business, got hit by a car, and ended up under that car. Okay? What happened was several individuals went, saw the situation, about 8 to 10 people grabbed the car, lift the car up, and now three people pull him from under the car, right? And then after they pulled him from under the car, they went to church and had a prayer meeting. Of course not, right? I'm just being sarcastic. I'm not being sarcastic. No, they didn't. They didn't. They took him straight to the hospital, called 911. They came, took him straight, they put all kind of stuff in him, get him there. So that's what they did, correct? Then they began to diagnose him to see what it is he had, to find out, and they had several surgeries before he took his first steps. Again, he had to learn to walk again. He had to learn to ride bicycle, get his balance back, etc., strength back. He broke in several bones in his body. And of course, as I said, with certain illnesses, there's leftover. So there are certain wounds that he had that was never repaired and that would follow him for the rest of his life because of the extent of being under a car in a motorcycle. Correct? And who knows how they pull him out, how sensitive they were to his injuries. They may have even caused more injuries when they just took him out under the car. But it saved his life because the car was on fire. Okay? So, after the time when he got all his treatment and all that, and had to learn to walk again, now he had an idea that what was wrong with him. He had reason to pray. He had reason to, because he knew exactly what the problem was. And then, even though he knew what the problem was, and even though he may have prayed, I don't know if he was a Christian or not, he still had to go through the therapy to learn to walk and use his limbs again. So my point is, some of us, as human beings, get hit by a Mack truck due to trauma and difficulties in the past, and we walk around as if nothing happened.
My Lord.
And that we have not been injured, and the only thing we need is prayer, and just pray it away, and the heart is still broken, the spirit is still broken, the vulnerabilities for mental illnesses are still there, all the above, the shame, the embarrassment, everything is there, and it's eating within us. And our capacity to love others is being jeopardized. Even our capacity to love God is jeopardized. And I could even illustrate that. The relationship between childhood injury and our capacity to love God. So here we go now, and I talk about it another time if we still have time. And so here we go. This person walks around like that. And we have family members and friends. They touch them at a certain point, say something to them, and boom, they explode. and they react. And we say, where this reaction is coming from? But I just simply, but then after a while, we begin to say, oh, that's how they are. That's how this person is. That's just as easy as even not realizing that is that injury, right? So they're walking a certain way emotionally and they're looking funny. Oh, that's how they are. But they're injured. They're hurting, and they haven't gotten the therapy from human beings. Therapy.
The connection between faith and works, where you pray but then you take steps of faith, not because we're
Mm-hmm.
helping God, because he doesn't need our help, but
Mm-hmm.
as we saw, even with Christ, he took the bread, he broke it, so he used an act of faith to be able to exhibit that miracle. And he did those things just like when he spat on the ground and took the mud and he healed the man's eye. He could have just touched his eye and healed it, which he had done before. But he also showed the correlation between faith and our works, not because he wants our help, but because our faith, our prayers activate, or faith activates our prayers. So I do see with you, but we definitely have felt that just praying is sufficient. And as powerful as it is, and there are times when it alone is sufficient, but we know that faith without works is dead. And the same way we care for ourselves physically, like you said, we need to do that spiritually as well.
Okay,
It
now the matter of prayer, though, what are we going to pray about? See, the issue is that we need to take the time through therapy to figure out the full extent of that injury. If this guy didn't go to the ICU after being in emergency and taking all the tests, he would never have known the full extent of the injury. So
right.
how do we even what to pray about, and even where it hurts or where it needs addressing, unless we get some kind of diagnosis and find out what is the extent of the damage and how it has affected us. That's the critical part, and that people don't recognize. Now, I want to give an example. I don't know how much time we have. Let me
We
know.
only have time for about another question, so we can,
Okay.
after this, I do want to hear your thoughts on that. I do want to address your thought also on prayer, but I want to hear what you have
Yes.
to say because I don't want you to lose your train of thought. But we'll just have
But
time for one question.
I, I don't mind ending here if you don't mind, foregoing your question, because I think this would have addressed your issue also, because you're talking about now healing and what to do. But the issue, for example, let's use Jesus as an example. You like to use Jesus as an example, okay? Okay, Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? When he was at his most vulnerable moment, you could say Jesus was the patient, he was not the healer, because he was experiencing a lot of pain, a lot of anguish, and he was clueless as to where that pain and anguish was coming from. He was feeling in a way that he never felt before, and he was overwhelmed by those feelings. So I would ask people, very simple, what was the first thing Jesus did?
Well, you can go ahead and tell us for the purpose of
I'm going to
moving
answer,
forward.
but I,
Yes.
I just wanted to process in people's mind. It is a trick question, because I know what some people who claim to be prayer warriors would say. He went to pray. No, he did not. That's not the first thing he did. The first thing he did was gather his disciples to express his feelings and to talk about what he was experiencing in that moment. And after he shared that, then he solicited their prayers.
And that could definitely be, a matter of perspective for someone who has relied on prayer throughout my ministry and its entire journey and have seen the absolute powerful benefits of reaching God first. I can see that a person's reasoning would be that yes, God is our first go-to, and then he opens the path to direct us on what we should do next. And so I can see why one's reason would be the reason that he went there was really to connect with God. And I can see your reasoning in saying, well, he did the first approach, which was to get the support system, which is true. He gathered with him a support system that he could go, still meet and commune with the Father. So I guess it could be a matter of perspective. And that was one of the things I wanted to address prior to us getting to that point when you asked the question, what would be the reasoning to pray in a moment like that? I believe the purpose for seeking God, even in the time of an accident where you know that you surely need to get to the ER, is also God making accessible to you the help, the resources, making sure that your needs are attended to, and allowing you to get all that is needed in what you are seeking. So for me, I can personally say there's never a time that I did it that way that it didn't work out. But I can also see your reasoning as well, in the sense that, God doesn't want us to be foolish. And he expects that we would be wise and exhibit wisdom. And if we're hurting physically or mentally, that we do not just merely sit and pray and do not seek avenues of help and getting the necessary sources, just because God has the power, and he does, to do anything. However, we saw even with Jesus, he sought the support of the disciples. And I really like the fact that you bring that in, because we don't really see it as a therapeutic concept, but it really was. He needed that support. And whenever he was in distress, he would pull those three guys. So that tells me that he also wanted that human connection, which is what your whole concept of therapy and mental illness is really based on, humanizing it. So I can see a reason, and I can definitely see the reasoning of those who say it's the first go-to as well.
Yeah. That's the problem. Is the first go-to. That's the problem. The problem is the first go-to automatically, without taking time to process their pain. They think they can bypass their pain by talking to God.
Well, I believe it becomes a problem if you ignore the other aspects. But if it is your process, can you hear me?
Clearly.
Okay. I see a delay here in your.
There's a massive delay.
Yes, but it's okay. We're gonna keep rolling because we're coming to the close of our segment tonight. But I appreciate the perspective that you are bringing. I am sure that there many arguments could come out of it. Not arguments as in a bad way. But arguments as in raising the question of, are you saying that prayer is not essential? Are you saying that it's not important? But I know that's not what you're saying. You're definitely just drawing the reference to the fact that, we need to pray. We must pray. It is powerful. And I believe that with all of my heart, having experienced incredible answers to prayer. But I also know that we must also take steps of faith on our times in prayer, because Christ did as well. And he wants us to do that, because of faith without works is dead. So before I'm coming to that, I guess that brings us to the question of, and I want you to help us to answer this, the correlation between our mental health and our spiritual connection, because it's right along those lines.
Feel I'm delayed. I don't know.
Yes, but it is okay because we can hear you clearly. Your voice is not delayed, okay. Just your imagery. Wonderful. So you can keep going.
Wonderful. So the issue here is this, and this is the issue where, and I have a whole presentation called "Take Time to Be Human." Yeah, Jesus was not a lone ranger. Jesus, took upon himself a support system that he used a lot. And so a lot of people, when they talk about prayer, they equate prayer with what Mary did at the feet of Jesus. Remember when, Mary and Martha, and Jesus said, Mary has chosen the better part. So they equate that with prayer. There's one element that's missing from that, however, when it comes to prayer, is having a human presence, that human touch, that human connection that Mary had with having an actual person in front of them in flesh and blood to speak with them and to process things back and forth rather than just simply, what should I say, depend on, the invisible person. See, Jesus tapped into both resources.
He
When
was
he was
well rounded.
when he was in pain, he tapped into the human resources because human pain. When we were struggling spiritually, he prayed and he asked, take this cup from me. So he tapped into both. And that's critical. The unfortunate thing is that when prayer becomes a replacement for that human connection, it is a problem. In the end, however, when the disciples did come through, in the book of Luke, it says that angels came and ministered to him. Right? So, what that means is that the divine power and strength is available whether people come through or not. Right? It is available. But
Absolutely.
exempt us from getting the therapy, a place to express ourselves or vomit, to express our feelings and our pain that we have. It doesn't exempt us.
And that is absolutely correct. And I believe one of the messages that we want to bring across tonight is the fact that our faith is very essential to how we handle all aspects of our wholeness, mentally, emotionally, physically, and otherwise. God is and will remain, and I believe I'm hearing that coming, from you as well, our first go-to in everything, because he is the superior being in our lives. It's God first and everything else. However, to your point, and I appreciate you again drawing reference to that, because I believe it is a mistake that we have made along our spiritual journey to not seek help, because we feel that our faith alone was sufficient to make us better. And yes, God certainly can make us better without a pill, without a bush tea, without anything. Yes, he can. However, he gave us resources, as he gave the herbs for the healing of the nations. He gave us doctors to assist us physically. He gave us therapists and others like yourself who is able to help us emotionally. And so, just like he gave us pastors to be able to help us spiritually. And I believe we should utilize all aspects of the avenues for healing that he has given to us. And yes, the connection with him that comes through prayer must never be neglected, but we must remember what the word itself said to us, that show me your faith without works and I will show you a faith that is very dead. And so I believe you were able to help us to understand, keep God foremost, keep him first. However, get help, seek help, talk about these issues, and not suffer just because we have great faith in him. I cannot wait for our next time on Live Talk, when we'll be able to go into matters like suicide, which is a much deeper topic. We could have touched on it tonight, but I know that it is a whole topic in itself, and I look forward to the next time that you're able to share with us on the platform. I appreciated your wisdom, but above all, your expertise. And I really want to thank you for having this one on one dialogue and helping us to take care of our mental health as we enter the new season of life. As the weather changes and everything looks dark and gloomy, how to still be able to have sunshine in our souls. Amen. And I believe you did an excellent job in being able to bring that across. So I want to thank you for taking time from such a busy schedule and gracing our platform tonight. I hope that somebody, even though it's one body, was able to glean something that could help them, or they could take it and help to better somebody else. And to our viewers, we are always so thankful to share with you in these topics. We look forward to bringing you all these exciting things that God has in store, but above all, those important things that are impacting us in the world. Remember to keep the faith, do not give up. And whatever you can do, pursue wholeness, which is mental, emotional, spiritual, and psychological well being, so that we can experience the wellness and wholeness that God intends. So, God bless you and keep the faith.
You are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, yeah, our God. Come on, you sing it all over the world. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Anybody know him to be a healer? Awesome in power.
I will say good evening to all our viewers all over the world and in the US. We are happy that you have joined us once again on this Friday Night Live. We want to welcome you once again on this Friday evening. It's very cold outside in New Jersey. I know some parts it's very warm, but we're very cold here in New Jersey. But we want to welcome you this evening. We have here with us in studio Evangelist Bradley Nooks. Evangelist Nooks, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here once again. I always enjoy these moments at the beginning of the Sabbath to get myself prepared for a full day Sabbath rest in worship and to make sure I receive a blessing in God's holy Sabbath day.
So Evangelist Nooks, it's been a very rainy week, cold week. How was your week?
Well, sometimes cold as it was out, cold inside as it was outside. All in all, it was, the ups and downs, the work, the job and the stresses of life as usual. Nonetheless, God has seen it fit to give me another opportunity to receive a blessing on His holy Sabbath.
So we are happy to have you here this evening. We have here with us once again our Pastor Leon Beckles. Pastor Beckles, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's good again to be back in the studio on Friday Night Live, ready and rearing to go and deal with whatever we're going to be looking at tonight. But I want to say happy Sabbath to everybody as well. And I trust that you are being restful, and may God bless you as we celebrate the Sabbath. And may you learn tonight, and may the program tonight be a blessing to you.
Yes, Pastor Beckles, how was your week?
The week was good. Thank God for His goodness and His love. Once we're alive, once we're well, amidst the pandemic, where thousands are losing their lives, if you are still alive, able to talk, you're not in a hospital bed and things like that, we've got to be grateful to God. So I can say like the hymn writer, safely through another week, God has brought us on our way. So let us now a blessing seek while we wait in His presence today.
Yes, Pastor Beckles, happy to have you. You said something earlier on, Pastor Beckles. You said, you thank God it's Sabbath. What is the Sabbath?
Sabbath is a happy day. Sabbath is a day of rest. Sabbath is a day of peace, a day of communion with God. It's a day that God has set aside, blessed and sanctified, and set it aside for communion with Him, for the human race to enjoy communion with Him, and to recall that He's the one that created us and created this entire universe that we live in. So Sabbath is a day when we come into the presence of God and have fellowship with Him, and as well as have fellowship one with another.
Yes, Pastor Beckles, I know, we have two engineers in the studio. They look forward for the Sabbath. Understand how some people, they work 7 days, so many hours. I work 6 days, and on the 7th day I'm so tired. And then from Sunday I look forward for the Sabbath.
Absolutely.
Monday I get excited. I say this will soon be here.
Yes,
Tuesday
yes.
I get more excited. On Thursday I say wow.
Yes.
The Sabbath is here. It's so good to be able to. I was talking to somebody today, and it said, you have late today at work. I said, no. I said, I'm at 6, not 6 p.m., but at sunset, the Sabbath is here, and I just spend time with my God.
Absolutely. And one of the blessings on the Sabbath is that for people who work, secular work, most jobs give you probably 2-week vacation. Some give 3-week vacation, and other little perks in terms of day off and so on. But God gave every single individual, those who work at home or outside, 52 days vacation. And that is in the form of his holy Sabbath day. It's a day of rest. It's a day of holy communion with God.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a day that declares to the whole human race God redemptive and his creative genius.
Yes. So it's a day of rest and gladness. You know, Pastor Beckles, I know the virus is still making havoc. I saw today France have a lockdown for 2 weeks, I believe. And we have, close to St. Lucia, we have a French island, Martinique. They're also on a lockdown because the cases are going rapidly over there. Even in my country, St. Lucia, they're close to 100 cases now. They were only about 20 a couple of weeks back, and now they're up to about 80 something. This thing, Pastor Beckles, is serious.
Yeah. What else could we say in terms of its seriousness? If this pandemic, this virus has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, it's not something to be played with, not something to be trivial about. We've got to come to realize that it's a new situation, and we could perpetuate it by, disobeying the regulations. We could go out to every supermarket, store, job, everything else. I think when this pandemic started, everything was shut down. Only the church now remains a shut down. So we ought to take it seriously. People need to take this thing serious, or you might become a statistic sooner rather than later. So I'm taking all the precautions. I'm doing what I need to do. But yes, this is the new reality that we have, and I'm just trying by the grace of God to stay safe.
Don't try. Stay safe, Pastor Beckles. Stay safe. You have to do everything in your power. You have to wear a mask. You have to stay home if you have nowhere to go to do anything. Stay home. And if you are by people, stay 6 feet. And if you see anybody coughing or sneezing, stay away from them. Because this thing is, not only will it kill you if you have underlying issues, but if you have it, you might have some organ damages.
Absolutely.
for a long time.
If you contract the virus, there are various studies that provide that while you may overcome the virus, over time, there are still lingering after effects, that you have to deal with. Some people for the rest of their lives. Some people for quite a while before they are totally, overcome the effects of the virus. And so one of the things that have struck me is that I have seen, several times over on social media, people go to the supermarket, and when they are asked to wear a mask, they create a scene and fight, and security and police have to put them out. We see in the political sphere also that people are having big political rallies, and without regard to their safety, in addition to other people's safety. And as a result, these rallies, political rallies and so on, have become super spreaders. And that has contributed to the rise of the virus and the spreading of the virus. So while there are mitigating efforts on some people's part, there's also some people who trivialize the virus, and I think it's time now for everyone to seriously contemplate the seriousness of this virus.
Yeah, it's not just political rallies, political rallies is only a little part of what's spreading the virus. But people are not being careful. They're still having parties, they still go out and do stuff, and not social distancing and wear masks. So every area of your life, wherever you are and you're listening, those who are listening on Periscope, YouTube, wherever you are on the Roku channel, wherever you are, just keep yourself safe, because this thing can have consequences not just now, but in the future. Pastor Beckles, I know a lot of people are saying that Christians should not be involved in politics. But Bible says, give unto Caesar what Caesar's. And as a citizen, people have the rights to give their votes when election. I can tell you this evening, you need to go vote. We're not telling you where to vote or who to back. That's not our duty. But as a citizen of the U.S., next week, Tuesday, if you haven't done so, you need to go to vote. Because if you don't vote, the consequences that come in the future, you will be accountable for it because you didn't do your duty is to cast your vote. So this coming Tuesday, if you haven't done so, it's your duty to go out there and vote because you have to give Pastor Beckles to Caesar or Caesar. What do you say?
Yes, voting is a civic responsibility. Whether you go to the polls or not, you are voting. And you might very well, by not going to the polls, you might be voting for somebody that you do not want to lead.
Right.
So, you need to assess your politicians, see what they are propagating in terms of, how their plans are consistent or inconsistent with your values and life and projections. Of course, the gospel is important for us. Should always be right up there in consideration. So we have to take up that responsibility. When you do not vote in the polling place, or in this case, send your vote in by mail in your vote. In this case, you're voting for the other. You're voting for somebody or the other, maybe the one you don't want. So I'll just encourage everybody to take up that responsibility. At least you have a say. This is the time when you have a say, when you elect the chief executive officer of your country, and I think you should, exercise your vote, your franchise, and make your choice. And I would say do that prayerfully.
Yes, prayerfully, Pastor, because I love this. Do it prayerfully. Because what happened in the past, and that's how quite a few of us are thinking. I've heard so many people, they've been saying for the past few years, my vote doesn't count, I'm only one person. Even Snooks. But if 1 million people say the same thing, my vote doesn't count, that's 1 million people that will not vote. Absolutely. So every single vote counts. Yes. So get up and do something.
Yeah, Christians to some degree believe, as you mentioned earlier, that we should not participate in the voting system. But I would encourage people to go out and vote. Nonetheless, there are two individuals in the Bible that participate in the spheres of government duty, and their participation we are sure in the case of Joseph. Joseph became governor and eventual prime minister in Egypt. Egypt really was a secular, ungodly, idolatrous nation, but Joseph's character stand the test of time, and in so doing, his character put him at the forefront of the Egyptian government. We also remember Moses. Moses was in Pharaoh's government. Daniel himself also was in the Egyptian, the Babylonian government. Daniel was the governor. So, but it was their character that speak to who they are and the God they serve that really exemplify them above everyone else in the political and civil order that was then created. And that, to my mind, is saying to us that we can participate in the system, but our character must exemplify the character of God.
Yes. So thank you very much. So just go vote. So let's.
I just want to add that there's a difference between your civic duty and being a politician. Again, we're not asking anybody to be a politician, to use any platform or to mount any platform to promote any particular party or anything, candidate, anything like that. It is your civic duty. It's not becoming a politician. It's nothing. There's nothing unrighteous about voting for the leader of your choice. You live in whatever location you live. There are leaders who are elected. The people are the ones who have to elect the leaders. So, and since you're a part of that country, you are a part of the electoral process. I think one of the problems that people have is sometimes the candidates do not give them much of an option.
Right.
And so sometimes, you know, people say, well, listen, one maybe 6 and the other one maybe half a dozen, which is basically the same thing. But what I can say, out of the 2 or in some places you have multiple candidates, you must know the one you do not want. There might be 2 who are, you know, almost the same, but you must, you know out of those 2 which one you do not want.
Right.
And, you know, that should help to inform your decision and your choices to who to vote for. But exercise your franchise, it's your civic duty, do it, get it done, and then you continue your journey, your spiritual journey. You don't have to take time off. You don't have to go and, you know, promote platforms and all these kinds of things. So just do your civic duty and God will bless you.
Yeah, because whatever happens next Tuesday might be affecting your children in the future. So make sure you do your duty. Yes, so we're back. You know, last week we spent some time talking about a fresh start. And we said, I said last week, but I said last week, maybe that's why the virus is still doing so much stuff, is because God wants us to have a fresh start. Because every time the children of Israel went to captivity, because when they misbehave or when they messed up, and when they went away from God's principles, so we need a fresh start. So if you want to see this program, go to the archives and you can see this program for last week. Pastor Beckles, this week we want to talk about religion versus relationship with God. So because a lot of people, Pastor Beckles, they're confused about religion, being religious, and having a relationship with God. Because we've seen, Pastor Beckles, a lot of people in the world, they're religious. You know, they go to churches, they praise and they do stuff. But is there a real difference between being religious and having a relationship with God?
Yes, they can be, but it does not necessarily have to be. But there is a distinction between religion and having a relationship with Jesus Christ. You could follow something religiously. I'm from the West Indies, the Caribbean. Cricket is the game there. There are people who follow cricket like a religion. There are people who have books and records from years and decades gone by with all the records, and you know, they can tell you things from, you know, give you statistics from the tip of your finger. And I don't believe that it's only cricket has that kind of situation. I think maybe in these United States you have people who follow basketball and people who follow football and people who follow baseball just the same. So we can do that religiously, and that's what makes the difference between having we can follow a spiritual path religiously.
Right.
Because I think before I try to even give a definition of what I think religion is, what I need to highlight here is the fact that the purpose that religion serves is to provide answers for the many questions that we have, the fundamental questions we have about life. Religion, by and large, for the most part, attempt to provide answers via different means of being informed.
Right.
Some claim inspiration, some claim, you know, all the other different, that's not coming to my mind right now. but everybody seemed to, that every religion seemed to have an understanding of how things happen, where we came from, how it all began, where we came from, how did we get here, what are we doing here, where are we heading. Those are the fundamental questions that almost every religion has set out to provide answers for. And so what those religions are saying is that there is a path to a better way, or there's a better way, or there's a higher, more spiritual way, let me put it that way. And so what they try to do is to propagate what they believe to be that path. And that is what religion do. So people can follow that, because religion, now I'll try to give a definition for religion. It's commonly referred to as an institution that have a set of organized practices and beliefs, belief system. They operate in a more structured way. And so while their quest is to provide fundamental answers to our fundamental questions, for the most part, they also pursue a spiritual, because somehow they believe that the answers to these questions has a spiritual connection. There's a spiritual connection to it. And so religion seeks to not only provide those answers, but to propagate it and to spread it as far as possible, because somehow they believe, they're convinced that this is the way that everybody needs to know. And so you have multiple religions doing different things. So we have these religions which most times trying to lead us to a path, to some higher power, to some higher being, to some other kind of experience that is beyond what we have in this present world. And so what you find happening with religion is that because it's organized and there are rules and there are, things that they follow, and so most religions try to keep a strict adherence, have strict adherence to that path and those belief systems and so on, those beliefs and so forth. And so what you find happening is that people become more caught up in the structure of the organization and the structure of the beliefs, and rather than pursuing the path, they become more defenders or apologists of the religion. The difference between that and a relationship with Jesus Christ is you do not need a religion to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Matter of fact, it needs to be personal. It needs to be personal. Your perception, understanding of God and who God is. Because if we're talking about relationship with God, we have to have some kind of perception who He is. And that is why religion has intruded so much on spirituality, and let me put it that way, on the spiritual path that people are trying to find, because religion is the vehicle where these different explanations and philosophies are rolled out. So people end up once in some cases, once some people get aligned, maybe hear what a particular religion has to say about the questions that they want answered, and they're convinced that, okay, this sounds good to me, that person becomes now a part of that religion. And so what you find happening, they end up defending the religion, they end up, focusing more on the religion and the organization. They can become so excited about that they forgot the spiritual path that they're supposed to be pursuing, and that spiritual part is what we would call or term a relationship with God.
Yes, and even the Snooks, Pastor Beckers, you gave us so much information there, Pastor Beckers. It was so good. I appreciate that. And we'll go slow now because I want us to understand, because we have many people listening to us who are not Adventists, who are not Baptists, but they are not even going to church because they haven't understood yet what a relationship with God is. Because they say these religions, these religions, all around, I don't know who to believe. Even Snooks, so Pastor Beckles explained to us what religion is. So, being religious, will that take us anywhere?
That's a good question. But I wanna set the tone for this question from the book of James, chapter 26 and verse 27. And it says here, if any man among you seem to be religious, and bridle not his tongue, but deceive his own heart, this man's religion is vain. Verse 27 says, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. Now, that in and of itself is a nutshell of what true religion is. And no matter, there is no other explanation than that can tell us what true religion is. In what this by definition is suggesting, that religion must be something that make the heart see tenderness or exude tenderness, care and compassion. In verse 26, it gives the personal context. If any man among you seem to be religious and bridle not his tongue. You can't be religious but tell people what you feel, and anything come to your mouth you say, and you describe people anyway and shoot any word out of your mouth. You can't be religious. So it puts us clear, it gives a clear definition of religion as it relates to your personal outlook, and then as to your external outlook come together. The Bible describes that as pure religion.
Okay, Pastor Beckles, someone said that being religious is you going to church and thinking about fishing. Let's say you're a fisherman. So being religious is going to church and thinking about fishing. And a relationship with God is going fishing and thinking about God. See the difference?
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. That made some sense as well, right? Because if you're thinking about God, you're thinking about our relationship with God.
Yes.
And so, religion, like you rightly said, if you go into God, but think about fishing.
Yeah.
You go into God, but thinking about fishing. You're more caught up in the ritual there, because you might have a special day set aside or a time set aside, to meet at a certain place, and so you're going there, but your mind is not there. And those are it's a tricky thing. It's very, very tricky.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, there is nothing really wrong, or it is possible that you can be religious while pursuing a spiritual path.
Absolutely.
The two can work hand in hand, right? The two can go hand in hand. So we should not think that because I am spiritual, that means I am not religious. Because again, like I said earlier, is what people are convinced about. And I just want to give an example. I mean, Evangelist Nooks was just the example I'm talking about. To launch his concept, he started with the Bible. But not all religions follow the Bible. You understand what I'm talking about? And so we need an explanation and understanding of religion that does not come from any particular religion itself, religious organization or body, right? And that means that we may not be able to use the Bible. Let me just put this in here, that sometimes we talk about religious liberty. And when we talk about religious liberty, we by and large, we are referring to our own organization. But when we're talking about religious liberty, we got to talk about liberty for all religions,
Right.
whether you subscribe to it or not. You understand what I'm saying? Because that is religious liberty, is not denominational liberty or church liberty or mosque liberty or, whatever distinctions these different religions have. And so we have to understand that the relationship should be the primary focus.
Right.
Because, and here's why it is tricky. Because some people say, a lot of people say, I mean, I work in the therapeutic community, and you hear a lot of people would say in the therapeutic community, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. And that spiritual that they're talking about is a search, more or less, and more often than not is an inner search, right? It's an inner search to have a connection with who we presume to be the higher power, who we presume to be God, who we presume to be divine, right? That is what I think spirituality needs to do. We got to come from within and seek to connect with that divine, with that higher power, with that God. And the reason why we need that connection is because somehow along the line there must be that inner conviction that this power is not only higher than I or higher than us, but we are dependent on this power. And because we are dependent on this power, that's why we pursue a relationship with that one. But why it is tricky is because sometimes, and I'm coming here now from a Christian background, from a Christian worldview, sometimes some people push that a little wrong to end up finding that spiritual connection within themselves. So I am connected to me because my higher power is within me. You follow what I'm saying? And you cannot have a higher power, pursuing a higher power, and that power is within you. You understand the contradiction there? So that is what makes it a little tricky, and that's why sometimes we go into we come across situations where people end up, referring to themselves as God. And if we take a look at the philosophy, the New Age philosophy and the postmodern philosophy, that's the kind of thing they're propagating, that your God is within you and you are your God, your own God. So, you don't need any organized religion, because you need to do this spiritual, you need to have this spiritual connection, yes. And that spiritual connection, I guess I don't know how to explain it, but it from what I'm understanding, it has to mean that your outer self is connecting now to your inner self, which is your higher self.
Right.
So it becomes a little complicated, and that's why it's tricky, and you got to be careful when we talk about spirituality, which is the connection, which is the relationship, and when we talk about religion.
This is deep, Pastor Beckles. This is deep. We get into some deep stuff to make people understand clearly. Being religious and having a relationship. with God. Because Evangelist Nooks, what God is seeking, God wants us to pursue Him,
Right.
not religion. You know, He wants us to pursue Him, and religion can or being religious can kill intimacy with God.
Absolutely, because some people, let's go to some facts here. Based on research, more people have died in wars pursued by religion or initiated on the cause or premise of religion than anything else, than disease and anything else in this world. In other words, religion will when people embrace religion, it can lead to all kind of debilitating issues. It can lead to death, warfare, destruction. People. For example, the war between the Tutsis and the Hutus back then in Rwanda. It was driven by that kind of idea. World War II was driven by religion, and so religion in and of itself can be a very dangerous tool. But like you pointed out earlier, when one pursues Christ, you pursue what James, you embrace what James 26 and verse 27 says. What is pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unspotted from the world.
Mm-hmm.
So pure religion is not something difficult. It's not something hard to conceive. But people use religion for alternative sources that cause death and destruction and all the world over.
Yes, very powerful stuff. So Pastor Beckles, so you would say, that what we have to seek after is relationship. Because, that's what God is looking for, is relationship. It's not being religious. There's nothing sinful about being religious. There's nothing wrong in being religious.
Right.
But what God is seeking after mostly is to have a relationship. Because we have so many people, millions of people who are so religious, but doesn't have a real relationship. We focus on every other thing in church life, the choir, the singing, the programs, and everything else. That's good to do. But God is looking for us to pursue Him, to have a relationship, Pastor Beckles, with Him.
Yes. The way I have to approach this here, because what we are doing is assuming that God is He. You see, we are assuming that God is Him. But let me just explain to you what I mean. Mm-hmm. In our world today, Christianity has about 2.4 billion. It's the largest of the religions. It has about 2.4 billion adherents. Of course, that's broken down into multiple, maybe hundreds of denominations, right? That's Christianity, 2.4 billion. Islam, 1.8 billion. Hinduism, 1.2 billion. Listen to the one that comes forth. Secular, non-religious, antagonist atheists together is another 1.2 billion. Buddhism, 500 million. Chinese traditional religion, 394 million. Ethnic religions, exclude some in separate categories, 300 million. African traditional religions, 100 million. And then we have a whole host of a number others with 26, 15, 14, 7, going down the line. Millions of people. So why I brought this to your attention is because Christianity subscribe to a divine being that they refer to God, who is Him, and Islam subscribe to a male God, who in some cases we could identify with the Christian God. But Hinduism, that has 1.2 billion people, they do not subscribe to the God that we're talking about.
Right.
So this relationship thing here is not the same thing.
Right.
The next large group is the secular, non-religious, antagonistic atheists. 1.2 billion. They don't believe in any God,
Right.
period. The Hindus got multiple gods. Then you have this secular group, 1.2 billion. They don't have any gods. Then Buddhism do not subscribe to the same God like the Christians subscribe to. And even though the Muslims and the Christians might have some common origin as it relates to their religious beliefs, because we're talking now about the Abrahamic religions, right? A lot of what we know is totally, different from, as a Christian. Now I'm going to talk as a Christian,
Right.
from the Christian viewpoint. Then we have Buddhism, I said that. Then Chinese traditional religion, another 300. So yeah, you have all these of the almost 8 billion people. We're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4. We're talking about almost 5 billion of these people who do not subscribe to the Christian God. So for some of these people, their gods, okay, we have Judaism, which might be a little different, because they may subscribe to the God of the Christians. So, but almost 2 billion, almost 5 billion people, or about 5 billion people, do not subscribe to this God that we're talking about, but having this relationship with.
Right.
So it comes down there to the worldviews, the different worldviews that people have. And so if they do not subscribe to a personal God, a God who hears and understands and responds and relate, then those people would be worshiping or reaching out. In the case of the Hindus, they're just reaching out for a better experience, a better life, because they do not believe in anything like death, not death, but they believe in reincarnation, that when you die, you are going to be reincarnate, you're going to come back again. And so what they try to do is to live their lives in a way that would be pleasing to their gods, so that when they pass, when they die, that it would please those gods to bring them back as a higher being, maybe as a richer human being. If you died a pauper, maybe now you come back as a doctor, that kinds of stuff. So that reincarnation thing. And so those people are not really pursuing a relationship. So I think where we're going tonight is more focused to the Christian worldview. And so in understanding that, we first have to acknowledge, because what we were doing prior to now is presupposing that everybody subscribed to Jehovah God, or the divine one that we believe, created this world and so forth. So if we're talking about if we're going to zero in on the Christian worldview and Christians, then yes, pursuing a relationship with God, the divine, is what is important. And, it's something that beyond religion, everybody should pursue. Now, you do not have to pursue, you could pursue it with religion, but your religion must not narrow your pursuit of a relationship with the divine. You see, your religion must not prohibit you from going to a certain point. There is where the personal relationship comes in. I can be a Christian, belong to a denomination, a religious denomination, but I still am pursuing a personal relationship with the divine. So, for example, if my denomination says that all that is revealed, all that the divine has to reveal is already revealed, and we should not pursue any more revelation, I can say, well, I want to have that relationship with the divine. I want to have that connection with the divine. So I'm going to pursue beyond what the denomination is telling me or the religion is telling me not to do. Mm-hmm. Because you see, when it comes to the spiritual connection, the ultimum or the ultimate or the maximum is when you have that divine connection with God. And that divine connection, that connection with the divine needs to be sustained. And so it would always be a void. So even though you're connected to the divine, today's blessings must be built on for tomorrow. But we can't say, well, I had a connection with the divine 5 years ago, and I don't need no other connection, and now that connection has waned, and rather than staying in connection with the divine, we have drifted forward and forward away, so much so that the religion, the organization that we are a part of, is now dictating how we should operate, rather than that divine connection that we have with God.
Yeah, a lot of information, Pastor Beckles.
It is. It is.
So
this is a lot.
This is very deep, deeper than I thought, Pastor Beckles. Yes, in very sense.
Yeah, and I was saying, based on the enunciation by Pastor Beckles, one mind can go right back to the Pharisees, and the way the Pharisees were engrossed in religion,
religious,
and could not see or entertain the thought of a relationship with the Creator that was right within their midst.
Because Christ came and they didn't even know.
And they didn't even realize. So, like as you rightfully said, religion can be can sidetrack one from really attaining a relationship, because in attaining and pursuing a relationship, one can actually get what we here have described in James chapter 26 and 27. Mm-hmm. That's where we get to practice true religion, when we have a true connection with our Creator.
And even just things also, Matthew, even Jesus himself, saw what he was saying about the Pharisees and the scribes. That's why he said in Matthew 15:8, you can put on the screen so they can see it. Matthew 15:8 said, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts
is not in me."
They are very religious, to the full extent, but their hearts are far from me.
Absolutely. and that's really what it is. I don't believe it is a difficult order to organize the realm. Nonetheless, it is people's perception of their own desire, personal desire, that sidetrack them and cause them to embrace religion rather than pursue a relationship with Christ.
Very good. And Pastor Beckles, we don't only have a few more minutes, left, but this is a deep study, Pastor Beckles. It's deeper than I thought it was, Pastor Beckles. Because Pastor Beckles, when Christ came on this earth, and he said this about the honor me of the lips, but when he came, he saw the Pharisees that they were honoring him there, so he called out a few. You remember that, Pastor Beckles? Mm-hmm. And I remember, I think it's Matthew 9:9, when he called Matthew the tax collector.
Yes.
And then he said, "Matthew, follow me." And then he told many others to follow him, his disciples. But what does that follow me mean? Does it mean to be religious or something different?
I guess follow could, without a study of it, follow could have the connotation of model me. Mm-hmm. suffice it to say that Jesus the Christ, who revealed himself as the Son of God, God himself, if we believe that he is who he said he is, then we can pursue. Follow me can mean become like me.
Yes.
Imitate me. Do the things that I do the things that I say to do. Right? So following does not just mean
Be around me.
be around or
Right.
and I think and I'm speaking here now from the Christian worldview. A lot of Christians get caught up with the idea of being saved by association. A lot of Christians pursue their Christian life, let me put it that way, as something I do now to benefit later. So I do what they say I have to do now, accept Jesus, get baptized, do all these ritualistic things. I'm saying it could become ritualistic. So they follow all those rules and paths that they said you must follow. But what the mistake that Christians make is to believe that once and sometimes we preach and give that impression, once I do X, Y, and Z now, then sometime yonder I will be rewarded. I will be rewarded. And so, people between now and then, there is a vacuum that is not being filled, that is lacking a connection. What I think Christ is saying when he says, follow me, is follow. Let me add something here. This is not what the Bible says, but it's follow and keep in touch. Is keep a connection. Is so it's not, well, I agree to follow now. I follow you to a point and then I wait for what you will give me some way down the line. The following is a process. It's a process, a continuous process, as long as you follow. Follow would be, I'll have to be able to check the Greek.
Yeah, the Greek says, apohohed, which means to stay close to me, to assist me, and do as I do. So that's what the Greek is saying. It's ahohed. Now that's the word.
I was just well, I know the word, but
you know the word, right? Because you did that word. I had to go look for it.
I'm just thinking about the voice and the tense and all these different things. It might be a continuous tense, a present continuous.
Continuous, yes.
It could be follow me. It's definitely not a punctiliar word. It's an action word, like continue following. So when Jesus say follow me, he's very well could be given the impression upon the follower's mind that you need to continue following me. So there's no starting and ending, but once you're connected, then you continue in that connection, you continue that relationship. Let me see if I can break that down a little bit for somebody who might be struggling with what I'm saying. When you get married on the 23rd of February, 2020, you don't say, okay, I start my relationship now, I get married, we do all the things to get married. And then I'm satisfied with that. We're not going to live together, we're not going to talk, we're not going to, contact each other, or, we sparsely do those things. I'll go live in the North Pole, you could be comfortable in the South Pole, and that kind of thing. There's no relationship. There's no affection. There's no desire for each other. There's no love. It's just a what kind of relationship could you call that? But you understand what I'm saying? But in order for you to grow and to become the two becoming one, you know, they say after a while, husbands and wives start resembling each other. It is a fact. Yes, after a while, husbands and wives start, you know, mannerisms, you know, they draw from each other. And so when Jesus says to follow me, that's what he wants to have. So we get started on the 23rd of February 2020, and we continue that progress, that process, that progress all along, every day, until he says it is finished.
Yes. Pastor Beckles, thank you very much. Our time is up, but looks, you know, but you have any final word for our viewers, you know, on tonight's topic? We'll continue this topic next Friday. It's so important. We have so much more to tell you about relationship with God. There's so much inside there. We haven't even touched, you know, the real point. So, if any last word for the viewers?
The last word I would give is to, at the base of salvation, pursue a relationship above all else. Pursue a relationship with Christ above all else. Because at the end of it all, it's not a religion that's going to give you the option as it relates to salvation or damnation. It is a walk, it is a connection, it is a relationship with your Creator that will determine which side of the fence you end up on.
Yes. Thank you very much. You know, Pastor Beckles, man, that was deep today. I didn't give you guys any notes, anything. I just gave the topic, and then you guys came out so deep. I appreciate that, Evangelist Stokes. You know, that was deep. You know, we'll continue this subject next Friday. Having a relationship with God and not just being religious. That's the important thing we have to do. Just want to inform you, you know, just before we close this evening, we're starting a crusade tomorrow night. Tomorrow morning, sorry, at 9:30, and then it will continue for 3 weeks. Expect Fridays we'll be here live, but we'll have a crusade starting tomorrow morning, so you can join us tomorrow morning at 9:30 for the next 3 weeks. The only off day will be on Thursday, but every night, tell your friends, your co-workers, your family of this crusade. We'll have different preachers every single night preaching from the Word of God, a crusade for 3 weeks. So please join us every night at 7 o'clock for this crusade. We thank you for your prayers and always praying for us and praying over this studio, because the devil is mad, the devil is angry, but because of your prayers we were able to survive and continue to broadcast 24/7 everywhere on YouTube. Everywhere you go, Global House of Hope is there. So Pastor Beckles, thank you for being here this evening with us. We appreciate you. Thank you very much for being here with us. Thanks to our engineers, and thank you for joining us this evening. We'll be live tomorrow morning at 9:30. Until then, you have a blessed and happy Sabbath.